listeners, if you like a noir detective theme and you like a big game in a little box, then you're going to want to check out Tiny Epic Crimes. Let's take a look at how it plays. In this game, players are trying to solve who the murderer is in their particular case. They can either work together cooperatively, or they can just try and solve the case separately, with the player who solves it correctly being the winner, unless they both solve it or all solve it, in which case then the player with the highest badge level will be the winner. Players on their turn can move around the board, and that will cost time to do so. The player who is farthest back on the time track will always be the one to take the next turn. And then they can also spend additional time to actually take actions, most of which will be collecting different tiles, which will be working toward an overall goal of how many they need in order to uncover specific evidence. These here need 5 to be collected, except in a 2-player game, which only needs 3, and the rest of them here need 3 each to be collected. When all of the players collectively, regardless of if they're playing cooperatively or not, have collected the last tile that is necessary, then the person who picked up the last tile will take the murderer envelope and the respective envelope of what was solved, and secretly, without flipping this over, put it into the appropriate envelope to see that new amount of evidence. Of course, if I can get it in there. And then flip it over and see what is revealed there. It's a little difficult to see, but it's a lot easier when you have it in front of you. And then players can make a note of which suspect has that attribute so that they can know potentially who the murderer is. Players will also potentially get suspect cards throughout the game, so they can look at those with the little magnifying glass here and say, okay, that person can be crossed off the list. They can't be the murderer because they were in the suspect stack instead. The game will go until everybody has reached the end of the turn order track, and players' games may end at different points in time, and then they will have to declare who they think the murderer is. Once players are familiar with the game, they can also add in the Kingpin expansion, which basically just adds new actions for the players to take in order to help stop the Kingpin. There's also a mini expansion, Crooked and Capos, which adds in loyalty cards, as well as different types of mobsters, which players will be able to arrest during their turns and their actions as well. I gotta say, I was a little bit surprised by this one. I expected a lot more deduction, but I felt like mostly what I was doing was set collecting. I would do the different actions that you were supposed to do, both in the cooperative and the competitive modes, and it really just felt like I was collecting different tiles in order to get a piece of evidence and then mark that off on my sheet. I didn't feel like I was really deducing anything, which felt a little bit removed from the theme for me. Although, that said, I did kind of like the different actions that you could do. I like that some had a little bit of a risk, while others were just being able to collect the information that you needed, and then try and make sure that you had enough of it in order to get those clues. I was really unsure about what I felt was better versus the competitive versus the cooperative mode. I thought the cooperative mode felt a little bit flat. It was a little bit boring because it didn't feel like there was much that you could do about the different things that were happening. It was just, okay, do whatever actions you can do and collect the different things on the board. But the competitive mode felt a little bit too semi-cooperative with the events, and with the fact that only the last person who picks up one of those tiles really gets the big reward for doing it, even if the other player or players did more of the work in collecting that particular type of evidence. So it felt a little bit, not necessarily unfair, but a little just bit like disappointing that if you did a lot of the work, you're not getting the reward in the end for having contributed a lot of the effort to that thing. So maybe the cooperative was better for that sense because of that, but I guess that really depends on how you view semi-cooperative elements in games and how you feel about that kind of ending bonus to those actions. But overall, I thought that the theme was fun, and for a tiny epic game, which sometimes I will have a couple of different issues with the different components, but for the most part, I thought that everything was a pretty decent size. The turn track was really the only thing where things were a little bit too big for the paper that you were tracking your turn order on, but otherwise, I think that they did a really good job of packing a big game in a small box. But you can check out my full thoughts on the blog today and check out if this one's for you.